Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. In today's video, I'm going to start a new series. I've been looking around YouTube to see what I could find on philosophy, hip-hop, sort of analysis of the concepts, and being a member of Gen X, growing up on hip-hop my whole life, also being a professor, I think I'm in a unique position to really explain sort of both positions, right? I understand hip-hop culture, I live hip-hop culture, and I also understand sort of academic culture, right? Academic, the ivory tower. Granted, I don't feel like I represent the ivory tower. I mean, I'm not wearing the jacket with the leather elbow pads, and and the pipe with the tobacco in it, the smoking pipe. Times have changed. But I think what would be important, the whole point of me doing all of these YouTube videos is to make information more accessible to the general population, right? The biggest misconception is that you have to have money in order to get education, right? And I think that's problematic, right? I think as long as you have the interest, you should be able to get education, and it doesn't have to be this heady, pedantic, very verbose, very wordy, very technical education. It can be street level education as well, right? It doesn't always have to be, tweed outfits and ties and stuff, right? With respect to hip hop culture, I think the biggest problem in the culture is the belief that there's this mutual exclusion, right? Like you could either be academic, you can either be educated, or you can, keep it real, right? You can keep it real. And there's a number of things that I'm going to discuss throughout these series of videos. The first thing that I think we need to discuss, though, is this idea of keeping it real, right? What does that mean, to keep it real? There's a lot of people that say keep it real, keep it real. The videos, I'm not going to do that cliche sort of YouTube how to keep it real or any of that corny stuff, right? It's more for people who understand what it means to keep it real. Do you really understand what it means to keep it real, right? You think you understand. Like MTV had that thing, you think you know but you have no idea, something like that, right? So with that, I'm going to begin the discussion on keeping it real, right? So the question is, what is keeping it real? In a general sense, in hip-hop, anytime you hear a rapper say it, right, or you hear somebody in an interview talking about keeping it real, they usually say it in connection to their street credentials, right, to street cred, to being real gangster, or real violent, or being a gangbanger, or just, having been shot at, or shot someone, or been in jail, or doing drugs, or whatever, right? So they keep it real insofar as what they say in their lyrics, right, map onto what it is that they actually did in the streets. So, for example, if I were, a kid who lived in the suburbs my whole life, and I had a full family with a mother and a father, the white picket fence, so on and so forth, and then I decided to become a rapper, and I come out as a rapper wielding guns, doing lines of coke and saying, oh, I'm keeping it real, I'm from the streets, I'm hard, well, I mean, obviously that's inauthentic, right? It's not real. You're not representing where you're really from, right? So, as a whole culture, hip hop rejects inauthenticity, right? And hip hop rejects the notion of, people pretending to be what they're not. And this is not just exclusive to hip hop. I mean, skaters, when I came up, I don't know about contemporary skaters, but when I was a kid, skaters used to have a word called poser, right? And you were a poser if, you were over there trying to ollie or trying to do skateboard tricks, and you weren't a skater, but you try to front like you were a skater, right? You call them posers, right? It's the same idea. So that's sort of like the superficial level, right, of keeping it real. I think that's the level. I don't think I said anything that most people don't already know, right? So that's the superficial level of keeping it real, right? Keeping it real means that you have to say in your lyrics what you actually practiced or lived in reality. And if there's a discord, if there's a disassociation between how you actually live and what you're saying, then you're inauthentic, you're fake, you're a poser, you're a wankster, you're whatever you are, right? You're fake. Alright, so that's one level. I want to go a level deeper, right? Because, I mean, if the general population understands one level, then it doesn't make sense me doing a video because you already know what I'm talking about. There's a deeper level though, right? And the deeper level is a little bit more complicated if you really think about the idea of keeping it real. And in these videos in the philosophy of hip-hop, I'm not always going to be, oh, well, you know, it's all great and I love these ideas. Some of these ideas are extremely dangerous, right? Especially if you misrepresent or misunderstand the notion, right? I think the notion of keeping it real is one of the most, if not the most foundational sort of concepts to understanding a philosophy of hip-hop. What is hip-hop? What is hip-hop culture? And I think as a culture, as all things, we need to progress, right? You know, we can't always be doing the same thing, right? It can't become a minstrel show. It can't become the Sambo act, right? Because if it ends up just being a bunch of Sambos and a bunch of minstrel shows, then, you know, I got to drop out of the culture because I can't represent that and I can't be represented by that. I think the idea of keeping it real has become problematic. I think it started at a good level, but now it's just a lot of people trying to get arrested so that they can get a record deal, right? I mean, let's keep it real. That's what's happening. You have, when you think about it on a deeper level, you have this idea of keeping it real, but the question is, okay, if I'm keeping it real, how does this play into the industry, right? The industry of hip-hop, right? And hip-hop is an industry, right? It's an industry like any other industry. And the point of the industry isn't to revolutionize thought. It is not to propel culture. It is to make money, right? So that people in the industry, and this is not all people, but the vast majority of hip-hop artists, and many of which I absolutely love and I listen to on a daily basis, are contributing to this corruption of the culture, right? And how do they do this with respect to keeping it real? Well, the idea of keeping it real, especially in African American culture, in black culture, for young black men like myself, right? The idea of keeping it real is motivated by, and it glorifies hyper violence, right? Drug dealers, pimps, you know, gangbangers, right? I have gangbanger friends, right? I know people who are in gangs, right? And they accept me for being an academic. I don't go out there and try and fit in and try and wield guns and, you know, pour champagne on women and, you know, grab my crotch and, you know, start shooting off at the mouth because they know that's not what I do, right? And I'm accepted by those communities because I'm keeping it real, right? I'm an academic. I do what I do, right? They're not academics. They do what they do, and we have a mutual understanding, right? It's all about respect. The problem with hip-hop, though, is that you have a select few, the most elite of their kind, that make it to this level of prestige, of prominence, of financial ability. And what do? Well, they tell their story. There's no problem in telling your story, right? I was a drug dealer on the streets. I was pimping. You have to pardon my French, but I'm going to keep it real in this video, right? I was a drug dealer in the streets. I was pimping hoes. I was serving dope. I was doing whatever it was that I was doing, and that's what their lyrics embody, right? Their lyrics embody what they were before they became rappers, or maybe what even they're doing while they're rapping, right? And that sort of authenticity about their street life, their credentials, their quote-unquote street cred, resonates within a community of people who, by default, right? Pac said it, right? I ain't never did a crime I ain't have to do, right? It's not like he glorified it. Pac understood the reason I'm out there doing dirt is because I have to do dirt. So those people who view themselves as having to do dirt, right? This music resonates with that culture, right? And obviously, dollars get invested and these people rise to positions of status, and this is the industry, right? The industry is finding people who have lived that lifestyle and putting them to a position, a status, and then, you know, they send out this message, right? They send out this energy to the world. Okay, that's a little bit deeper. There's an even deeper level than that. Now we're going to get deep, right? Because at a level deeper than that, the question becomes, why is the industry looking for people who are fresh out of jail to become rappers, who were known bona fide drug dealers to become rappers, who are known incarcerated pimps to become rappers? Why is the industry looking for these people? Why does the industry glorify these people? Why are these people, and I'm not knocking them, because like I said, I listen to this music, right? I like NWA, I love NWA, I love hip-hop music, right? But why is the industry? It's not about me, right? It's not about you, it's about the industry, right? That's the whole point. Why does the industry want these people? It's going to get a little, now this might be a little radical, but here's my thought, right? My thought is, and this is way out there, but my thought is, the industry, in a sense, is in bed with the penitentiary system, right? The industry is in bed with the penitentiary system, because the industry knows that the vast majority of young minority men will never be able to rise to the status of a Jay-Z, of a Gucci Mane, of a Nas, of a Waka Flocka, of a P. Diddy, of you pick your rapper, right? You insert rapper here, right? They know that the vast majority of rappers will never rise to this status, right? But if you have rappers who have actually kept it real, they've lived the life of being drug dealers and pimps and Macs and gangbangers or whatever. They clean themselves up. They get out of that and transition into sort of the bureaucracy, the industry of hip hop. And now obviously there's way more money to be made being a hip hop artist than being a drug dealer. But they rhyme about the only thing that they know. They rhyme about the streets. Well, people in the streets listening to that music, listening to those lyrics, are going to think, hey, I want to be a rapper too. And the way that I get to that level is I need to be in the street. I need to be in the street serving dope. I need to be in the street pimping hoes. I need to be in the street banging. I need to be in the street doing those type of things, right? And what ends up happening, maybe 1-2 individuals out of maybe 5 million people who listen to the music and are actually in the streets banging, in the streets serving dope, in the streets pimping hoes, make it to that status. What happens to the rest of them? They get locked up. They get locked up, right? They get locked up. And I have before I was 15, 16 years old, I had known plenty of people who were killed for being in gangs, plenty of people who got shot, plenty of funerals, the whole cliche, blah, 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 right? What happens to everybody else? Well, they go to jail, right? And I've done a video on the privatization of the penitentiary system, right? There's money to be made in locking people up. So keeping it real for hip-hop, if you really think about it, right? If you really take it to a deep level, keeping it real is really fueling the penitentiary system, right? It's sending the energy into the world. It's sending that vibe into the world that you need to be gangster. You need to be hard. You need to be repping your set. You need to be killing people. You need to be violent in order to get it out, right? The whole point of hip hop is that there's this desire to get out of the grind. And I'll do another video later about what does that mean. What is the grind? I'm not going to get into that now, right? But to get out of this the oppressive state that a lot of urban children, black, white, whatever, just urban kids, poor kids live in, right? I understand why they do that. The point is, you have very few people who represent alternative modes of getting out. You have very few people. I can't really name too many rappers that rap about, like me, who would say, oh, well, you know what, I lived in poverty my whole life. I know a lot of people who were doing illegal things, banging, selling dope, all this other crap. But I decided for me that I couldn't do that, and I went into academia and I got out. Why not give rappers like that? I'm not looking for a record deal, right? But why not give rappers like that an opportunity to get their message out, right? Why not give that sort? But then they say, oh, it's conscious, and oh, he's preaching, and nobody wants to hear that, right? Why is it that we as a culture, and this is not just black or white or Hispanic, we people who listen, people who are and classify themselves as hip-hop, why is it that we as a culture don't want to hear that? Why don't you want to hear a story that I made it out of the ghetto, I was able to raise a family and raise a kid, you know, based on hitting the books? There's a book grind, right? You could be on your book grind, right? It don't always have to be the dope grind. I'm on my book grind. That's what I do. I'm on this research grind. That's what I do. I mean, and that's what I do, right? With the same intensity that somebody sits down and strategizes how to section off a block, right? How to take control taking control of whatever it might be that you're trying to take control of, is the same way that you sit down and approach anything in life, right? You can approach systematically anything. Why is it that the industry isn't giving voice to alternative modes of getting out of those urban and those impoverished situations? The reason is that the industry wants to lock minorities up. That's the fact, period. The industry wants young black men, young Hispanic men, young urban white dudes to be like, yo, the only way you're going to get it out is by selling meth, by pimping hoes, by, you know, living that type of lifestyle. And you live that type of lifestyle, and you want to be a rapper, so then you go press up your vinyl, and everybody's talking about killing everybody, and the death rate goes up, right? And what do we have? We have a community of dead people, right? We have a community of people locked up. We got a community that's stagnant. We got a community that's not doing anything at all, right? And mainstream rappers who are at the top of their game, you need to think about that, right? When you go to bed at night, I'm sure consciousness is like, oh, well, you know, it's whatever, I'm trying to get my money, I'm doing me, you know, forget them cats. But in a sense, you know, as a community, we got to think about what we're supporting, right? We got to think about what we're supporting. And for the pop culture, the culture who actually does the purchasing of the product, right? Because it's typically not going to be the urban dude who's going to go out and buy the CD. He's probably going to end up bootlegging the CD, right? Who buys the CD? Well, I haven't done the research, but it sounds like, you know, white America is buying the CD. And the question is, well, why is white America fascinated with this violence, right? Why are they fascinated by it? Well, I would say that it's catharsis, right? They're stuck in a house where everything is sort of regular and ordinary every day after day after day, and they want entertainment, right? They want to see another grittier, grimier side of life. What's a gritty, grimy side of life, right? You don't need to listen to hip-hop in order to experience it, right? You can go volunteer your time at the Boys and Girls Club, right? You can go to the inner city and try and clean up a park, or try and get a bunch of dope fiends off of heroin, right? You can see it because it's there to be seen, right? You know, listen to hip-hop music isn't experiencing what the ghetto really is about. The ghetto isn't about hip-hop, right? Hip-hop is about the ghetto. But the ghetto isn't about hip-hop. The ghetto is about struggle. It's about poverty. It's about oppression. It's about despair. And hip-hop is capitalized on the oppression of people who are already oppressed, right? I love hip-hop, but I recognize the poison, right? You drink it in small doses, right? If you take it to the head and think it's going to be all good, you're going to wake up in the middle of a coma, 35, 40 years old, spending a couple of years in a prison, you know, doing odd and stuff, wondering where your life went because you was trying to be a rapper. When you could have been a man about your business and taking care of your wife and taking care of your kids, you know, and saving your money and buying a house and doing what you needed to do, right? So if you out there, right, and there are people out there who really do live that gritty lifestyle, but the cats that I know that really, really, really live that lifestyle, they're not trying to be rappers, right? They're not trying to rap. You know, they're not out there glorifying rap music, and you know, they might invest in it as a business venture and so on and so forth. But when it really boils down to it, the people who make it out and rise to the top, they did dirt, right? But they didn't do any more or less dirt than anybody else did. They have a global stage to talk about the dirt that they did. And what ends up happening is that people who aspire for the same position use what they say as a blueprint. And what ends up happening is maybe 1, 2 dudes rise to the level of actually passing on a baton, next generation of, you know, endorsers of violence, endorsers of misogyny, endorsers of, you know, abuse and sort of just the destruction of a whole way of living, and they glorify that. And what happens to everybody else? You get locked up. And people are making money from you getting locked up. So the whole point is, as somebody from the inside, right, somebody who understands hip hop culture, somebody within the ivory tower, right, who understands academia and sort of this, different modes of thinking, we got to recognize that if keeping it real in hip hop only means being violent, pimping hoes, serving dope, if that's what keeping it real means, then it's the fakest thing out there. Because in the ghetto, you got people who play instruments, right? You got people who do drama, right? I know plenty of people that left the ghetto and went on to drama schools, right? World-renowned drama schools, right? You got people who learn other languages. You got people who endorse and help out their communities, right? And these people might want to be rap artists as well, right? So to keep it really real, they need to have a voice, right? If they don't have a voice, if they can't create a niche, if they can't be, if their means of escaping the ghetto isn't real enough, then the question is, what does keeping it real really mean, right? If there's only one voice, then it's not keeping it real, because there's always going to be a diversity, right? There's always going to be a diversity, a variety of ways to get up out the ghetto. There's a lot of ways to do it. And a lot of those people that do it want to have an opportunity to tell a story, just like the gangbangers, right? Just like the drug dealers, just like the pimps, how they got out in lyric, right? In verse, right? So if I got out because I was a creative writer, then I should be able to, in hip-hop, be able to carve my little niche. If I did it through drama or through dance, I should be able to carve my little niche and give the population sort of my 2 cents on how I got out, right? Otherwise, the idea of keeping it real is crap, man. I don't even listen to that, right? Keeping it real that's child's talk, right? 5-year-old talk, right? When you become a grown woman, when you become a grown man, you got to put away all that childish foolishness, right? And the idea of we're going to keep it real. Well, I can't keep it real then, right? Because I've never been a drug dealer, a gangbanger, or slap women up in a pimp, or none of that, right? I keep it real by, doing these videos trying to educate people. That's how I keep it real. And I'm not trying to be a rapper. If you are, then what you need to do is you need to carve your niche, right? And you keep it real. Don't go out there and start trying to be somebody you're not, because what's going to end up happening, if you're really one of those kids like me who were really into the books, and you try to keep it real, and you go on the street and really mess with some hardcore bangers, you're going to get gobbled up. They're going to eat you up, right? Because they keep it real for real. And they're not trying to get a record deal, right? They're trying to section off that block. So don't go over there trying to be something you're not, right? Because then you're going to end up with the wrong crowd, right? Just be who you are and people will embrace you, right? People will embrace you. Don't be fake. To the industry needs to get changed, right? Otherwise, I'm going to bow out and listen to hip-hop and I'll get off into jazz music, which I don't quite understand, but, so hopefully hip-hop changes, right? This idea of keeping it real. I'm not going to get much deeper than that. I think that's good enough. I think you get the point. So the first thing that I wanted to do in this series of the philosophy of hip-hop is to discuss the idea of keeping it real. And let's redefine what that means as a culture. With that, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Have a good day.